welcome to Brown Girl Book Lover. I'm Leslie Ann Murray. Today we have Xochitl Gonzalez of Olga Dies Dreaming. I am so happy she's here. I've been waiting for this moment forever. Xochitl has an MFA from the University of Iowa Writers Workshop, where she was an Iowa Arts Fellow and recipient of the Michener Prize in Fiction. She was the winner of the 2009 Disquiet Literary Prize, and her work has been published on Bustle, Vogue, and The Cut. She's a contributor to The Atlantic, where her weekly newsletter, Brooklyn, where she writes a weekly newsletter. Algor, Brooklyn, what's the name of the weekly newsletter?
Brooklyn Everywhere.
Brooklyn Everywhere. Okay, that cuts off. Olga Dies Dreaming is a New York Times bestseller. It was published in January, and it's her first novel. Xochitl, welcome to Brown Girl Book Lover.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so looking forward to talking with you, and I'm like really touched by your enthusiasm for Olga. It's so lovely.
Xochitl, tell us about Olga Dies Dreaming.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I've now been talking about this book for, in some capacity, 2.5 years, and I still can't quite say it in one succinct sentence. But what I will say is that it is the story of a middle-aged woman named Olga and her brother, who on the outside seem to have all the trappings of success, but have swept a lot of childhood family trauma under the rug in order to maintain this image of having it all. And their kind of personal journey to coming to terms with who they are and self-determination and self-acceptance of who they are and how they want to live their lives happens over the course of the months before and after Hurricane Maria, as their mother sort of re-enters their life, who had abandoned them when they were much younger. And their journey parallels the journey of Puerto Rico and in some ways of Brooklyn, which has been so changed by gentrification and is sort of kind of finding different footings. So it's sort of, I like to say that it's kind of a parallel story about gentrification and colonization as much as it is about, you know, personal self-determination and kind of finding independence. The central thing that I'd say is like it's a family novel, and it's really was important to me to write about middle-aged people sort of having this experience. I think of it as a middle-aged coming-of-age story, you know, like is sort of the way that I think of it.
I love that it's a coming-of-age, middle-aged story, because I so identified with Olga, right? Just like her fierceness, her career drivenness, but like her just like this like she wants to deal with trauma, but not in the way that you want to deal with trauma. She just wants to sweep it under the rug and move on.
Yeah.
I identify with that. And I love that you brought this character into the light, and this character who's grappling with what it means to be loved at 40.
Yeah.
We don't see, right? And she's not like someone who's like, oh, love me.
That's
she's
right.
fierce.
Yeah. She's almost rigidly anti that, right? Like, and I think, you know, it was super interesting to me because I felt like I had not, I think it's also probably maybe unintentionally a very Gen X book, because I do think that this idea of like dusting yourself off, particularly for women of color and people of color of like that 40 plus age, I think it's this idea of like, what are we gonna do? You got to keep going, like palante, siempre palante, but like you've got to keep going. Like what, you know, you can't. And I've had conversations with like younger reading groups, like Gen Z reading groups, and they're even amongst like Latinas, and they're very distraught at some of the things that happen, because they're like, she just keeps going. She gets over it too fast. And I'm like, it was also sort of a generational commentary, because we weren't really raised to indulge pain, actually. Like, and I think in some ways it's a bit of a character study in some of that, and what are the ways in which we keep going. And it was also really important to me to write her as single and being that way, you know, like whether you know, it's fierce in some ways, it's like self-protective in other ways, but like I know as many, if not more, successful women of color who are single in their 40s, as I know, if not more, than who are married. And I think that that's like a real thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, where it's like, because she goes through these things. One of the things that I really wanted to write about was, I always say, like, I feel like it's weirdly in conversation with House on Mango Street, because I felt like Esmeralda in the book, she wants to get away from the block. You know, she's like but then, and she's so hungry to get away. But like, what does it take once you leave? And how isolating that can be, and how you can feel a little bit like an alien because you aren't as much a part of where you're from, and you're not fully necessarily of the world that you are then now emerged in, and how hard it can be to find other, like a partner with that same experience, you know. And I think that when she meets Mateo, it was, by the way, it's so funny. He's actually Mateo because it's like the Jewish spelling. Like, I really wanted him to have like this kind of ambiguous name, but like, but like, to me, I felt like what it is like, he's also from Brooklyn, so she feels like she can relax. Like, it's like he's like a native like her, but he also like had gone away to one of these New England colleges. Like, he'd sort of been on this like hamster wheel of like success, and like has like a totally different like whatever. And it's almost like he can talk to her on these facets that I know from personal experience. It's hard to find somebody that can talk to you on all those facets. So I wanted to show that.
So in the book, Algor finds love later in life, and so many things are wrong with Mateo, but Olga claims him as perfect.
Yeah.
And I just love that, because it's like, when I think about like loving as you get older, you kind of like be like, oh, this person has a lot of things going on, but they're perfect.
Right. They're perfect. That's right. Well, and I think in some ways they're really interesting in that he has all of this like physical stuff that he needs to be around. You know, he's a hoarder. For anybody that has not read the book yet, he's a hoarder. It's not a spoiler alert. He tells her right away. It's like they meet and he's like, I'm a hoarder. So it's like right away, he's a hoarder, and he's carrying all of this baggage, and he's aware that he's like very much mired in grief for his mother. Like, he hasn't quite figured out life. But other than that, he's actually dealt with a lot of his stuff. Like, he's actually emotionally pretty clean, you know, like it's like he's very cognizant of the flaw. He leads with the flaw. And I think for her, like when you go into her apartment, it's like sparse. Everything is like perfect. She's got like one little bookshelf, like the mugs, like everything, like, and it's like inside she's carrying everything. It's like, so they're like, we're opposites. Like, it's the sparsity there, and it's empty there, but in her heart, it's like, it's a mess. And I think that him being so open about his flaws, she's so worried about people finding out her imperfections. You know, she's really scarred by the idea of being labeled. And I think that, to me, you know, that came somewhat from personal insight, but I think any of us that have come from, let's say, families of alcoholics or families with addiction, or with like anything that gets perceived as shameful by the larger society, abandonment, like, you know, these are things that we worry cascade and define us, right? And I think it's like, you're so frightened of it, you can't own it, you know, like, and I think if I were to imagine Olga in 5 years, like, I would imagine her very comfortable being like,
when I read reviews of your book, and like after reading your book, I was like, they're not doing us justice, because so much of this book, I felt like it is an indictment of class and classism. And like, it's like they're swooping that over. And like, why was this so important to talk about classism?
I think that it's the thing that, because we're conditioned to aspire to wealth, we're ashamed to even have concern about, like, in some funny way. And like, and to me, I felt like when I got to Brown, for instance, like the things that made me feel inept and like were the things that class was a barrier to. And obviously I have a lot of skin privilege, but it made me realize, like, my grandparents didn't feel comfortable. My grandparents like never came to see me, because the first time they dropped me off, they were like, we don't know what anybody's talking about. Like this, like, we don't understand. Like, and it made them feel so ashamed. And like, just the idea of like, I don't know. Like, I think that we take for granted, like, and also it was very important to me because I hadn't been seeing this, I've talked about this a couple of times in live events, but like the MFA programs, like, and the role that they play in publishing has made class almost taboo in literature. Like, because it's not a concern of so many writers, because they are coming in. And I remember workshopping this. I workshopped the first week I got to frickin' Iowa. I had 200 pages and everybody was like, it was in Sam Chang's novel workshop and nobody wanted to go. And I was like, well, I'm here to go. I mean, that's the difference. If you go someplace at 42, you're like, am I not here for you to read? Like, I was like, I'll go, like, whatever. And everybody was like, I don't know the last time I read something where somebody was worried about money, because I thought, I really didn't want to make her a wedding planner in the beginning because it felt like lazy in some funny way. Like, I was like, oh, come up with another profession. But I know so many women of color, so many Latino women that are hustling, trying with their own business, that are this, that are that. And I did want to write about the anxiety around that tension of being on TV and having no money, because people don't care if they pay you. Like people with tons of money don't care if they pay you on time. Like, and I wanted to write about that and the sense of anxiety and self-loathing that can give you, because you're like, I'm faking my life. Like, you feel the pressure, feeling like you're faking your life. And I wanted to write about that because I do think that so many women of color are in that position, and Latinas are in that position. And that felt important to me. And I just thought that it was, I've literally lived worrying about money off and on at different degrees for my entire life. I'm finally in a place now where I'm not. And actually, I'm so used to it that I still worry. Like, it's like, like I wake up in the night and I'm like, I forgot to pay a bill. Like, it's like a reflex. And so I just really felt that was important, because that is, to me, even amongst middle class people, what's middle class anymore? Like, it's like a vanishing situation. So I thought that was important. And I thought, actually, but that said, I also thought it was important that the family generally be situated in a lower middle class background. Like, I think the idea that, like, I wanted to show people that I really knew, which is like where, everybody didn't go to an Ivy League school, but you went to Brooklyn College, you went to BMCC, like, you've got like a nice little union job. Like, it's like a good, like, you've got you've got a thing going on. Like, I think to just show that there's degrees, you know what I mean? Like, and degrees of success, and that these things mean different, a good life means different things to different people.
Your novel reads like an ode to old Brooklyn. Well, old New York before gentrification hit. And you gleefully highlight the community, just the connectedness of like communities before gentrification. And why was it really important to talk about gentrification and its effect on the community?
Well, first of all, it's my heart. Like, I didn't know another way to talk about it. I wrote this book. I started this book and sold it a year to the day, basically, that I started the book. But I think the reason why I was able to do that was because both issues, like the largest issues, which I think is the colonial destruction of Puerto Rico, and what I would say is a mirror colonial destruction of Brooklyn, felt so urgent to me. But like, and I've thought a lot about it since, because I think at the time it just was an instinct, but now it's like, I wrote about this a little bit, like when I was for the Atlantic writing about the war in Ukraine, and it's like, when somebody is coming for your home, the amount, and telling you that your home is now is meaningless, and they think it's this other thing, the strength and the fierceness and the anger that you will feel, because this is your home. And that is kind of why I had to write that, because to the point about class, actually, is when I grew up, my acting teacher used to say in high school, I went to like a kind of theatery high school, like not LaGuardia, like it was like a Murrow in Brooklyn. And one of my theater teachers was like, Brooklyn is where people live. Brooklyn Heights is where people reside.
Mm.
Like, because at the time, Brooklyn Heights was like the nicest neighborhood, you know, like, and and it was a place for people that lived. Like, it was like houses were owned by like bus drivers. Like no, it wasn't like you didn't have to be an investment banker to own a house in Brooklyn. Like, it was like I mean, my grandparents bought the house with my grandmother's sisters, and they were all lunch ladies, and my grandfather was like an MTA worker, like literally, like. So I think the idea that like this idea that it was a place for working class people who were, that said, always creative. White rich people didn't bring art to Brooklyn. They didn't bring writing to Brooklyn. They didn't bring music to Brooklyn. I lived around the corner from a hard rock club, like where my grandfather would go. Me and Jessica Pimentel, like Jessica Pimentel from Orange is the New Black, we talk about going to like Lemoore all the time. Like that was like one of my first little club. Like it's like there was always music making in Brooklyn. There was always art in Brooklyn. There were always fine artists in Brooklyn. There were always all of that. And there were people that worked day jobs as like night jobs as barbacks, or day jobs like in construction. The idea that somehow elite white college graduates decide to migrate here and brought art here, brought literature here. I felt like this to me was like my effort to reclaim like my Brooklyn in a literary space. Like, and that felt intensely important to me because I felt it had been hijacked and stole. Like I felt my land had been stolen.
I wanted to talk about, you just mentioned Clevis Natera's book. In your book, there are so many familiar themes of class, of gentrification, of colorism, and of like belonging and where is home. And I know this is like a big ask, but I find it interesting that these two Latinx writers come out the same year, and a lot of the issues they're handling and dealing with are so similar, but very different, right?
Yeah.
I'm interested in like, I feel like there's a deeply philosophical thing about this, and I don't know what it is.
I told her this literally also. I was like, I see, obviously Clevis is a Dominican writer and I am a Puerto Rican writer, but and Clevis is, you know, an immigrant herself. But I read her book as a very American book in the ways that it grapples with, like I've seen things where it gets categorized as like immigrant literature, and I see it as a very American book because it is people grappling with American values in relation to their like, and particularly in both cases, their Caribbean values, right? Like, and I think like the, you know, and there's tiny little things that I sort of love that they have in common. Like it's like this, like the strained relationships with food, like the strained relationship, like, you know, it's like what are our bodies supposed to look like? Like what is a good body? What's a bad body? And it's all because of this growing up in America and the relationship to the neighborhood. So yeah, I don't think it's like, it's interesting that they ended up getting published at around the same time, but at the same time, I think it's a reflection on the intense nuance that the Latinx like woman is feeling, particularly in urban environments. And that we have been so flattened. That's why people are like shocked by these books. Like, it's like we've gotten so flattened, particularly in Hollywood. I mean, particularly in Hollywood. And I think that these books are saying, I am Latina and I'm also having a very American experience.
What is two takeaways you would like readers to get from reading Olga Dies Dreaming?
Oh, I think I would say that self-love and self-acceptance can come at any age. That probably being the most important thing to me. And that, yeah, you know, like home is important and community is important. And that like we can make better lives for ourselves by being there for each other.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. What is the last great book you've read?
Oh my God. The problem is that I've been reading books that aren't out yet. And I am obsessed with this book called A Country You Can Leave. It's by Sally, and I'm going to freak out on her last name, but it's amazing. It's coming out next year. And it's basically about, it's a crazy book. It is about an Afro-Cubana daughter and her white Russian mother, who is like, and they're like kind of living from man to man. And like, it's a fraught like mother-daughter relationship told in the first person by the young daughter, and they're living in a trailer park in California, and it is amazing.
Thank you so much for joining me, for talking to me. I adore you. I hope, I hope you know, like,
thank you so
I'm
much.
such a fan of your writing and your politics and your quests. And,
Thank
I really enjoy your energy, and thank you for joining me.
Listen,
I appreciate everything.
so much. I'm equally, this is a beautiful conversation. And just, yeah, and you just, I don't know, it's fun. It's always so cool to me when I do these and like the conversation's different than other conversations. So I really just, I don't know, I appreciated it. And it's fun talking about the real thing. They're always really qualitatively deeper conversations when I get the opportunity and the privilege to talk to another writer of color about anything. And it's just so lovely because I think we understand we're trying to access multiple depths, right? Like, so
Yeah.
thank you for appreciating the book.